Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today we're checking out this blue-green or Simic mill deck that's gonna try to have our opponent draw from an empty library so they lose the game, and that's thanks to the new exhibition Tidecaller from Strixhaven, a 1-mana 0/2 saying whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell, target player mills 3 cards. And that effect is very similar to the Glacierwood Siege, which is a blue-green enchantment for 3 mana. If we choose a Teamer mode, whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, target player mills 4 cards instead. So now with both the Tidecaller and the Siege, we want to pair these with a lot of cheap cantrips that can draw us cards while triggering the Siege and Tidecaller to very quickly mill the opponent out. And then the Water Crystal can maybe further enhance those mill effects, in addition to discounting all our blue spells by 1. And then now, whenever our opponent would mill 1 or more cards, they mill that many plus 4 instead. So then the Tidecaller mills for 7 and the Siege mills for 8. So that can also add up very quickly. And then we can also potentially get the job done with a River Churn Monument. Once the opponent's already milled half of their deck, we can now maybe play and exhaust the monument, essentially milling the remaining half, milling equal to the number of cards already in the opponent's graveyard. Can also activate the monument for 1 mana, and then any number of target players each mill 2 cards. Sometimes we do actively want to mill ourselves, either with a monument, Tidecaller, or sometimes even the Glacierwood Siege, since we can then also enable our Flow State, which is another new cantrip from Strixhaven, as we get to look at the top 3 cards, and with both an instant and sorcery in the graveyard, we get to select 2 of those to put into our hand. And then we also have Stock Up at 3 mana to look at the top 5 and choose 2, and then some 1 mana cantrips with both Sleight of Hand and Opt. So we've got a sorcery and an instant to also help enable Flow State early on. And then the rest of the deck, besides all the mill cards and cantrips, is a bunch of bounce effects, so we can hopefully buy ourselves enough time and interact with the opponent's permanents until we can set up a lethal mill. So we've got 2 copies of Bounce Off, can also maybe bounce our own Tidecaller with it, and then Into the Floodmaw can bounce any opposing permanent, so it's a bit more flexible, even if we have to give the opponent an extra fish token in return. And then Aetherize can be a blowout if our opponent doesn't respect it and attacks with their entire team, as we can now bounce all attacking creatures back to hand, so that can also buy us a lot of time to then keep milling the opponent and hopefully mill them out completely before they redeploy a lethal attack. Then if we ever get some good green fog effects to prevent all combat damage in Standard, I would also consider playing those since they also have good synergy throughout. And then the mana base, just 22 lands since we have a ton of card draw, and then every land needs to produce blue mana. And then we also have the new Dreamroot Cascade to help out with a green starting turn 3 for Glacierwood Siege. And then we still have Botanical Sanctum, Breeding Pool, and The Verge. So again, every land producing blue mana is important, but just enough green to help support the Glacierwood Siege. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump in some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the draw with promising hands. Double Tidecaller to start milling early, facing a white deck. So yeah, could already play a Tidecaller. And then we'll see if we draw an untapped land. Cascade is currently tapped. So this mono white. Yeah, not entirely sure what to make of this yet. Could be kind of a blue-white tempo deck. So maybe it is worth it to Sleight of Hand, mill the opponent, and then get some more intel. Okay, it is a green-white, maybe tokens deck instead. And they're gonna get lost a Tidecaller now. Fair enough. We find a Flow State, I think. Although, let's see, we've got sorcery, we've got some instants. Yeah, I'll take the Flow State. This is probably going to be a grindy matchup. And our opponent's going to be drawing cards with a talent, which kind of plays into our game plan. So, yeah, probably want a Tidecaller before we Sleight of Hand again. Still probably milling my opponent. We'll find targets for Floodmaw. Can always bounce the talent. Take the lanes. And then could Sleight of Hand again to try and set up our Water Crystal. Okay, so we'll see if they have another answer to the Tidecaller. Day of Judgment, yeah. Pretty drastic for a 1-drop, but our opponent knows that it's going to be a problem. So now Water Crystal to discount my blue spells going forward and make our mill cards more effective. Talon draws a card. And copy the Mutavault. That's a very nice interaction with the Mutable Explorer. The Ooze is relevant graveyard hate. We'll see if they think about using it before I get to flow state. Don't need more lanes. I guess they can use the Ooze in response to me using flow state, at which point I'll probably Floodmaw something. They let it resolve. So then opt plus Floodmaw. And then what's next? Can maybe wait for them to level up the Talon before we bounce it. Don't think I need Aetherize just yet. And a Siege is fine. So now I'm also incentivized to play the Siege first, letting us mill the opponents. And that's now milling for 8, thanks to the Water Crystal. Could have also waited to play around another Get Lost before they get a chance to destroy our enchantment. Elspeth is gonna apply a lot of pressure, but having an Aetherize in hand means I'm a lot less scared. 37 cards remain. Another Floodmaw. So I probably want to start by bouncing Elspeth, because otherwise they get double the fish tokens. Can do that in their upkeep, so the tokens have summoning sickness. And then... yeah, I don't think we're activating Water Crystal. So let's see, if I were to cast all the spells in my hands, that's 4 times 8, 32, so we're very close to getting there. Mill my opponents. They do get the 2 fish tokens. So I just want to avoid having to Aetherize this turn. If I Aetherize next turn, we can buy ourselves a whole other turn, basically. So Elspeth resolves. Mutavault activates, which gives me a chance to bounce Elspeth before they got to activate it. So then I'm just taking 6 here. But Elspeth is definitely presenting lethal next turn. Attack for 7. That hits. And then can wait on the Floodmaw, I suppose. Riverturn Monument should make it easy now. With 27 cards in graveyard, can play and exhaust. And that's game. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a promising hand. Start with Tidecaller, and then can start by milling myself to enable flow state. Opponent red-black, looks like the Mardu discard deck. So they do also have some graveyard synergy that we don't want to enable with the Tidecaller. Milled enchantment sorcery, so still missing instants. And Alpha is next. Opponent's already considering discarding some spells. They're still on the Flamewake Phoenix build. As well as Bloodghast, so they can get value out of the graveyard. So this might just be red-black. Take 4. And a siege. Yeah, I guess we get the siege down. Take another beating next turn. They can maybe get back both Bloodghast and Phoenix. But yeah, we'll be able to Aetherize on the following turn. And hopefully get the ball rolling. Phoenix is back. They seem to be missing a land at least. So this is a 9 damage. They typically don't have many burn spells for me to worry about. Second main land into Incy. Alright, I guess we'll hope to set up a good Aetherize. Casey Jones. Yeah, I mean, this could line up well for me if we make them bounce all their creatures and then discard them with Casey. It's going to be random. And our opponent's going to go all out. I'll let the Inti resolve, discarding a land. They exile the land as well. And this is one of the better Aetherizes you're going to see. And now it's time to start milling. Another Bloodghast in the graveyard, so that's scary. Opponent can use the elf to discard things they had left in hands. Hex they cannot cast with a mountain. Okay, my opponent can't forget about Casey Jones' trigger here. 11 cards in graveyard. So it looks like flow state for starters. I mean, opponent can certainly present a lot of damage here, especially if they can get back Bloodghast from the graveyard. So we have to be very careful. So finding a bounce spell for Casey could be nice. As we mill 2 more Bloodghasts, so that's all of them. Flamewake Phoenix. So has to be opt and a land. And then hope to opt into a bounce spell. Or Sleight of Hand rather. Because without Casey, at least they won't be able to get back the Phoenix as easily. Alright, did not find the bounce spell. So I guess now I could opt, see if I would draw anything useful. If not, play tap Breeding Pool, and then we're likely just dead on board. So I don't need to mill my opponent anymore, but I don't think it makes a difference since we've already seen all the Bloodghasts. Another Tidecaller as a Trump blocker. Does that matter? Yeah, I mean, it's all going to come down to how they discard randomly with Casey. They don't necessarily have a land to get back Bloodghast either. I don't think Tidecaller is useful. Okay, did find the Floodmaw, so that's huge. So then now I probably wait to bounce Casey. Or do I? Can wait for them to go to combat and then bounce it, which might affect their sequencing. Even though now they can't randomly discard Casey. Alright, so they still have a Bloodghast in hand. Only 14 cards remain, so I may not even have to use Monument to close it out here. But if they drew a land, we could still be in trouble. Since triple Bloodghast has haste, opponent goes to combat, so now we get to bounce. Milling once again. So now no Flamewake Phoenix gets returned and our opponent scoops it up. Wow, super close one here. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. This is a one-lander, but we do have both Tidecaller as well as multiple cantrips. So I feel like this is still manageable. And then don't want to waste any mills. Start with a Tidecaller. Between opt and sleight of hand we can enable flow state, so I can mill my opponent here. They're on Jeskai control. Yeah, generally against control, mill is pretty effective since they aren't fast at closing out games. And then sure, we'll make sure the opt resolves. And then do I want land number 4? Might be overkill. We'll draw more naturally. Do want to have a lot of spells that are kind of must counters, and Monument is definitely one of them. Opponent's going to immediately zap the Tidecaller, understandably. So then we can resolve the siege, which they might get lost. It's actually harder for them to destroy the Monument. But now we can at least double spell. Yeah, they had the get lost, keeping up a mana, so this could be Spell Snare. Or maybe like a 1 mana burn spell, in case we had another Tidecaller. Spell Snare seems more likely. Or Spell Pierce. Can test out the waters with a Monument. That resolved instantly. So then, probably fine to flow state now. Find Tidecaller, sleight of hand. Don't think I need a third Monument. So then if Tidecaller resolves, we can first sleight of hand, trigger it. If they remove it, once again opt to mill for another 3. Opponent's now desperately digging. Maybe they need to hit their land drop. And yeah, they need to come up with a game plan, because the clock is ticking. So then the Steam Vent's untapped last turn likely represents a burn spell for Tidecaller. Mill you for 3. And get a water crystal. And then I can opt now. Ithrise is one of our weaker cards. Now I still want to be careful and not play Monument into what could be an Ultima to destroy all artifacts. So instead I can explore and maybe activate the Monument. Bounce off would be fine if I had it in hand, but I don't think I want to draw it. And then we can pass. So they already have 16 cards in graveyard. I'm fine exhausting the first Monument if we can resolve the second one afterwards. Ideally have enough mana to do both. So Tidecaller down. And we'll mill for 2. No need to mill myself. Alright, they actually had the Abrade. Opponent maybe adapting to the loot decks, who knows. So now it's pretty important that we resolve the second Monument. Another Siege isn't bad. So how about Water Crystal into Siege? And then hopefully find more cantrips. Could also try to replay lands from graveyard, but actually didn't mill any so far. I guess I haven't been milling myself at all. And draw the land. So now I can activate Water Crystal while I have 2 cards in hand. And yeah, opponent's not going to play this one out. But yeah, can slowly start milling them just by activating Water Crystal. And then at some point, if we feel like the coast is clear, we can go ahead and play the Monument, immediately exhaust if it resolves. And that should be game as well. Sweet, on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw with a keepable hand. Good mix of card draw, interaction, mill effects. Maybe one too many mill effects. Facing what is presumably the black-white skeleton deck. Okay, so don't necessarily want to expose Tidecaller to removal right away. So I think I go tap Breeding Pool, and then next turn we can maybe Tidecaller, keep up Floodmaw. They've got the Weaver on 2. So they're off to a good start. Aetherize is a way to bounce a bunch of tokens. Just need to make sure I hit my land drops. So now with Tidecaller, at least we can either opt or Floodmaw. Ideally punish Sheltered by Ghosts here. And they've got the Corpses of the Lost as well. That's rough. So then I could bounce the Spider token as opposed to the Scavenger. And still take 6. I guess there's no huge difference between the Skeleton and the Spider. And the Skeleton could get bigger if they have another Corpses. Milling my opponent is a little dangerous in that they have Forsaken Miner that they can return. But we gotta start somewhere. Opponent's gonna keep Corpses in play. Kick things off with a Sleight of Hand, look for mana. And there's one miner in the graveyard, hit the land. And then probably want to keep up Floodmaw again, plus Opts. Since they're gonna get double strike here in a second. Targeting the token, so that's a good one to bounce. And a case also with a hasty Skeleton now. Counter on Scavenger. Yeah, that's a lot of damage. They could still have a Seam Rip left over. Godless Shrine untapped. For a nowhere to run. Okay, so still gotta bounce the Spider, and then we can opt on the way out. And then hope to find a land for Aetherize. It's gonna be a painful one. So they still only have 13 cards in graveyard. Yeah, this is not gonna end well for me. And then once we bounce the Skeleton token, the case is gonna be solved as well. Just didn't have enough time to set up. Best case scenario, they activate Sanctuary and attack, but don't see them doing that. And there's the Corpses again. Yeah, if we had a little bit more mana, then we could maybe think about Monument Exhaust. But we're pretty far from that. Okay, another case, so they are going all out. We'll see if they play around Aetherize. But I think we're dead regardless, since they also have a Sanctuary. The case is now solved, so they can just tutor up another Corpses of the Lost. And that should be all she wrote. So yeah, 13 cards in graveyard. Can go Water Crystal Monument, will be tapped out. But yeah, there's no real keeping up appearances here. And yeah, opponent just sends in the Sanctuary. Alright, GG's, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a functional hand. Got a good mix of mill, card draw, and interaction. Facing blue-whites, yeah, let's get the Tidecaller in play before they can counter it. And a Bricks, so it is the blue-white artifact deck. So they will have some removal spells that can exile my artifacts and enchantments as well. Bounce spells like Floodmaw are decent. I think I start with Flow State, milling myself to try and enable it. and did not quite. Aetherize is decent once they start making constructs. I guess it's good enough here. So now we can probably start milling our opponents. Starcage exiles just a Tidecaller and the bricks. That's fine. Play the siege. And hopefully at least one of them can stick the landing. Drew another Aetherize. And there's a snare for one of the sieges. Can run it back. Monument is susceptible to another Starcage, so it's not quite as reliable. And another snare. Yeah, I mean, they didn't have a synthesizer, so they had to have something else. So, do we think Monument, or just stock up, look for more sieges? Could also flood maw, but feels a little early to start flood mawing. Find Tidecaller, sleight of hand. Yeah, I'll run out another Tidecaller. And they're gonna have to use another Starcage to get rid of it. At least they're not pressuring me in any meaningful way. So we've got time to set up. Monument also requires a Starcage for them to answer it. Thinking about maybe going Flood Maw so I can then flow state and it'll be enabled. That's probably worth it. And get back a siege. And then they'll have to spend a turn replaying the snare without a synthesizer to really benefit from it. And then another stock-up seems decent. And I think I like the Flood Maw as well. So we can sleight of hand, or we can once again Flood Maw the Perilous Snare. So those are our considerations. I don't think I've played a land yet, so I can maybe sleight of hand into a land. And then still have Flood Maw available. Peril Snare is back. We'll get some more mills on the way out. And yeah, our opponent's gonna scoop it up. They know this isn't sustainable. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a keepable hand. Tidecaller with some card draw, some interaction, facing blue-red. So maybe wait on Tidecaller until I can at least trigger it once, in case our opponent's holding a Burst Lightning. So presumably some sort of Izzet Prowess deck, could be a different variation. Okay, so now Tidecaller into Sleight of Hand seems fine. Milling my opponent has consequences if they're running the Crab package, or of course Stormchaser's Talent can also benefit from a full graveyard. But I think I still do it. Got to start somewhere. And yeah, Firebending Lessons, it might be the Lessons deck. So yeah, we did enable their Accumulate Wisdom. Flow State needs instant in the graveyard. Tidecaller likely to get removed, so I don't think we should count on it. Much prefer the artifacts and enchantments in this matchup. And our opponent's not the fastest at closing out games, so milling the Lessons deck is not a bad win condition. So, still missing instants. Can try Sleight of Hand. I wanna try and play around the Quench counterspell if possible, although that might be a little ambitious. 3 steps to draw this card, okay. At least they didn't have it as a counterspell. Steam Vents untapped for a monument, so that's their win condition, although they're still missing a discard outlet. Untapped land probably for another Firebending lesson, small chance it's a Spell Snare. So I think I'm okay going for the Water Crystal now. That resolves. And then now our card draw is a lot more efficient. Another monument. And Accumulate Wisdom still doesn't enable it. And the Siege is excellent. Alright, so now we can start milling for 8 each time we cast a cantrip. Start with a stock up. And find flow states and then monuments. Although let's see here. There's already 15 cards in graveyard. Maybe I can get away with Floodmaw and monument. And then I'm kind of okay just bouncing the monument right now. Or I can resolve my own monument before they get a chance to counter it. They could bounce stuff with Boomerang Basics, that's about it. Yeah, at 20 life I feel pretty safe, so... At most they can deal like 12 damage in this turn cycle, if they can enable Monument again in my turn. Gran is definitely enabled here, giving spells a 1 mana discount. 3 steps copying the Monument, could have punished that with Floodmire Response, I suppose. So now they already get to trigger 3 monuments. Alright, that's getting a little scary now. 30 cards in library, Consult goes digging. They still haven't found their Artist's Talent. There's none in the graveyard either. So they're still in circulation, presumably. And they're gonna keep up some mana. Alright, so bouncing the Monument token is one way to go about it. Of course, Gran, once it taps, can also draw discard to enable the monuments. Although, let's see, our opponent only needs to be milled 1 more time by the Siege plus Crystal combo for Monument to be lethal, so can maybe start by bouncing Gran so they lose out on the discount. Alright, that works, so yeah. Activating this should do it. And there we go. Pass a turn. They could technically still enable the monuments if they can discard somehow, but usually discarding in this deck is paired with drawing, which wouldn't work. And yeah, we're still very safe at 20 life. Sweet, on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw with a keepable hand. Double Tidecaller can put in some work. May need to find some interaction, depending on the matchup. Don't mind seeing a Sewers, unless this is the Sultai Graveyard deck. Maybe some sort of Graveyard deck. So then milling my opponent could have its drawbacks as well. Yeah, it looks like Sultai. Okay, so now I have to think real hard whether or not I want to start milling them already. Or if we played more patiently. Because if they have a Kivero in hand and they mill the Bringer of the Last Gift, I could just die on the spot. So maybe it's just Tidecaller pass the turn, get the Siege down, and then try to mill them very quickly all at once. Okay, Prankster. So it's not your usual Reanimator deck. Maybe they're bringing back enchantment specifically. Yeah, I mean, maybe I do Sleight of Hand then. If it's not a Kivero deck, the number of cards in graveyards maybe doesn't matter as much. I see Yuna makes sense, although we haven't seen any white mana yet. But yeah, Yuna can get back both enchantments that we've seen. Awaken, destroy 1 Tidecaller. Could have also destroyed the Siege. Opponent's gonna be helping us by milling 3. See a Squirming Emergence, which is now enabled. Luckily they don't have one in hand. Alright, so now we can do some damage. Start with probably, let's see. Next turn they could maybe get back Yuna or a land to cast Yuna if they have one in hand. So then having an instant speed bounce spell would be useful, although I suppose this has a ward 2 during their turn. So can only bounce Yuna if I immediately find a bounce spell with a sleight of hand. So I'll start there. Milling more Yunas. They do have Kivero, as it turns out. Water Crystal's interesting. I wouldn't be able to play it this turn, so maybe I prefer the opt. And then I can opt and then still flow state at least. So we're milling for another 7. Yeah, they are already halfway through, so now Monument could maybe end it for us. Bounce off could be useful if we want some interaction. At the very least, it's another siege trigger. But I think I do tap out for flow state, and then just look for River Churn Monument, since that could just end the game now. Finds Siege and Floodmaw. So expecting them to reanimate maybe their Bahamut, which can destroy the Siege. We'll see. Skivero can basically do the same. So Kivero as Yuna. 16 cards remain. Yuna triggers. And gets back Summon Bahamut, destroying the Siege. So next turn this can destroy stuff again. Have not found the River Churn Monument. Opponent's got 16 cards left in library. So if I play the Siege, I could bounce Bahamut, mill for 7, and then bounce Yuna or Kivero, mill for another 7. 2 cards remain. Yeah, I think that's worth it. And then bounce Kivero. And our opponent scoops it up. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We have what looks to be a functional hand. Still need to find another mill effect to combine with the monument to get things going. Start with a sleight of hand. And a Tidecaller seems okay. Also need to hit some more land drops. Opponent's a blue-red. Another Tidecaller. Well, we could try double Tidecaller, or I can just Tidecaller opt, or even Tidecaller pass with bounce off available. Quite a few options. Playing Monuments also one of them. If I don't want to expose these to removal, it will let the opponent know exactly what we're doing, but maybe that's fine. Could get countered by Spell Pierce or Spell Snare. Opponent just opts. So then ideally I draw land, so then next turn I can play double Tidecaller and still have a 1 mana instant available. Opponent plots a Slick Shot. Don't love seeing that, but I do like seeing the island. So now with double Tidecaller, we only need to mill half their deck before Monument can close it out. And this goes pretty quickly, but we can expect them to have some answers. Slick Shot resolves. And they're gonna Boomerang Basics to bounce the Monuments. That's acceptable. Not gonna tap it in response. And now flow state is enabled, but we also now get to bounce the slick shots, which buys me quite a bit of time. So I think that's worth it. Could have maybe waited for them to resolve the flow state, since that might affect their decision slightly. So I'm probably not gonna replay the monuments for a while, just wanna find more cheap interaction to interact with the slick shots as we keep milling for 6. And then another flow state looks good, alongside stock up. Don't expect the monument to get countered. Opponent is playing the crab version, so they will have that available for just 2 mana as well. Take a land, and then sleight of hand versus siege. We already have a cantrip. Siege might be overkill, since, yeah, opponent's close to just being dead to Monument Exhaust. But if they answer both Tidecallers, maybe I'll want to siege. It's a tough call. We're still at 20, so that's promising. They know they're in danger of dying to this River Churn Monument. We'll see if they can stop it. Slick Shot for 2 mana. Probably gonna see some burn spells. No, just Stormchaser's Talents. And an opt, so no answers to the Tidecallers. And just an attack for 5. Opponent draws, 27 cards remain. Bloodmaw was a huge draw as well. So do I even need to play the Monument? What if I play the Siege? Then every spell mills for 10. Can play 2 more with Opt Floodmaw, and then stock up next turn can hopefully get it done. I think that's more efficient and a little safer. So then, do I have to even opt now? I guess I can wait, since it's not going to get better than Floodmaw. Maybe there's an argument for bouncing the Slick Shot in case they have a hexproof trick to protect it. They've got another one. Okay. And a flow state, so yeah, once again, at most they'll have 1 mana left, so I'm happy bouncing a Slick Shot now. Mill you for 10. You get to draw your cards if you want. Tidecaller is happy to chum block. Passage untapped. Finally burst lightning the Tidecallers, but it's too little too late, as we can mill for another 10. Do have to watch out that they don't burn me in their upkeep before they take a draw from an empty library, but we should still be safe here. 4 cards remain. And then, I mean, I could keep the lands to exhaust the monument, but again, it's not necessary. So chump the Otter, take 5, untap, and our opponent knows that they're dead. Awesome! So yeah, we get to finally rank up to Mythic, playing this janky Simic mill deck. And yeah, I've been trying a bunch of different decks to try and get that last rank up, and nothing was really going my way until I switched to this blue mill deck, since yeah, there's a lot of more controlling strategies in High Diamond, as I've noticed, so those tend to punish more aggressive and proactive creature strategies, but they do tend to be quite weak to the mill effects, since you can just cheaply get them in play and then sit back, cast a bunch of cantrips, and punish all those slower decks that rely on winning the late game, since yeah, if you don't have any cards left in library, there's not much of a late game left to have. So yeah, the deck will be weak to some of the Reanimator decks, of course, although I have noticed a slight dip in popularity in some of the Kivero decks. And then red aggro decks with a lot of burn spells and haste creatures are also one of your worst matchups, since trying to bounce their hasty creatures for 1 mana is usually not a recipe for success. But if you can face anything slightly slower, or even decks like the Aura matchup where they tend to stack a lot of permanents onto one creature, then your cheap bounce spells are a pretty nice answer. Now, if you were worried about opposing graveyard interactions, there are some green instants that can still synergize with your Exhibition Tidecallers and Glacierwood Sieges. Cards like the Glorious Decay or Heritage Reclamation are 2-mana instants in green that can both draw a card in addition to exiling 1 or 2 cards from the opponent's graveyard, so those can still potentially come in handy. But of course you do lose out on a few synergies with cards like the Water Crystal not giving them a discount, and at 2 mana they're a little clunkier than your 1 mana blue cantrips, so it's always a bit of a push and pull. But yeah, for now I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.